The air smelled like lilies and rain-soaked soil. A soft wind stirred the black veils of mourning guests, fluttering through the cemetery like a whisper of something lost. Evelyn Anderson stood motionless beside her father's grave, her hands clenched into fists inside her leather gloves, the cold earth beneath her heels unsteady. Her eyes, dry and tired from days of weeping, stared at the polished coffin being lowered slowly into the ground. There was no comfort in this ritual, no peace in the prayers spoken by the pastor. Her father, Gerald Anderson, a man known for his generosity, integrity, and commanding presence, was gone. And with him, the last fragment of her safe world had vanished. She was 21 and alone. All around her, guests from the city and from across the state had come to pay their respects. Businessmen in tailored suits, politicians in dark coats, neighbors who had benefited from Gerald's quiet philanthropy. Even people Evelyn didn't recognize had come, some crying, others whispering behind gloved hands. But not everyone had come to grieve. Victoria stood just a few feet away, dressed in black from head to toe, not a hair out of place beneath her feathered hat. She looked every bit the grieving widow, her eyes hidden behind large sunglasses, a silk handkerchief dabbing at her cheeks. But Evelyn knew better. Behind those glasses were eyes as dry as the desert, and a heart that hadn't loved anyone but herself. And beside her stood Stacy, Victoria's daughter, her stepsister. 19, beautiful in a superficial way, and twice as cruel. She wore her grief like a costume, one Evelyn suspected she would discard the moment they left the cemetery. Evelyn's lips tightened. She remembered the first time she met them, 9 years ago. Her mother had only been gone 2 years when her father introduced Victoria to her in the rose garden behind their estate. Evelyn had been just 12 then, still clinging to the fading scent of her mother's perfume, her drawings still pinned to the corkboard in the hallway. Victoria had arrived in a cream-colored dress, her red lipstick smiling too much, her arm around a sullen, pale-faced Stacy. Evelyn had watched them with wary eyes, hugging her sketchbook to her chest. "I know this is hard," her father had said, kneeling beside her that day. "But Victoria, she's a good woman, Evie. I think she'll bring some light back into this house." Evelyn had wanted to believe him, but Victoria had brought no light, only shadows that crept quietly over the years. She had begun by redecorating the house, starting with Evelyn's late mother's sitting room. Then came the new rules. No more breakfast with her father, no more late night sketching in the study, no more soft music drifting through the halls. And Stacy had wasted no time mocking Evelyn behind closed doors, pretending to be sweet when adults were near, then calling her names when no one else could hear. Gerald, ever busy with business and charity, didn't see it, or perhaps didn't want to see it. He loved Evelyn, but he was tired, lonely, and Victoria knew how to fill that void with quiet cunning. The sound of soil hitting the coffin jolted Evelyn back to the present. She flinched as the pastor dropped the ceremonial handful of dirt, then offered a final prayer. "From dust we came, to dust we shall return." Evelyn whispered her own prayer, eyes shut tight. "Please, if there's anything left of him in this world, help me hold on." As the final amen echoed across the cemetery, guests began to disperse. Some offered her condolences with soft touches to her arm, others with hollow words. But Victoria approached with purpose. "My dear," she said, voice like velvet over steel, "the guests will be arriving at the house shortly. There's still much to be done. I've asked the staff to serve a light lunch." Evelyn didn't respond. Her gaze remained on the ground. Victoria lowered her sunglasses, her eyes cold. "This is not the time to fall apart. Your father would have expected grace from you, especially now." Stacy leaned in, her tone syrupy. "You should come back and change, Evie. You don't want to look fragile." Evelyn turned to them slowly, her voice low. "Don't pretend to care." Victoria's lips tightened, but didn't argue. "Then do it for appearances," she said flatly. "This house and its name still carry weight. You'll understand that one day, if you ever learn to grow up." The three of them stood in silence for a moment, Evelyn in her raw, genuine grief, Victoria and Stacy cloaked in calculated decorum. Then Evelyn turned and walked to the car alone. Back at the Anderson estate, everything looked the same on the surface. Flowers arranged on the entry table, chandeliers gleaming, staff moving efficiently. But Evelyn could feel it. The change. The shift. Her father's presence was gone, and in its place was something colder, sharper. She sat alone in her room as guests mingled downstairs. The large portrait of her father above the fireplace stared down at her with stern kindness. She longed to talk to him, to ask him why he hadn't seen through them. A soft knock came at the door. Without waiting for a response, Victoria entered. She closed the door behind her and folded her hands. "We need to talk." Evelyn stood. "About what?" Victoria walked slowly across the room, taking in the details as if evaluating what she now owned. "About your future," she said. "Now that your father is gone, certain matters must be settled. And you are not a child anymore. There are decisions to make." "I'm very aware," Evelyn said. "Starting with the will. I haven't seen it yet." Victoria smiled. "It's being handled. Your father left instructions. As his wife, I've been entrusted with temporary oversight of the estate." "Temporary? Until you're married." The words hung in the air like a guillotine. "What?" "You heard me," Victoria said, as if discussing something as mundane as redecorating the guest room. "You're of age, and with your emotional condition, it's clear you need guidance. Your father wanted you settled, protected, married. So we've found someone for you. A good man. Humble. From the countryside." "No," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a choice." "I do," Evelyn snapped. "You may think you control everything, but you don't control me." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You're wrong," she said, stepping forward. "You're entirely dependent on this house, on this name. You don't have access to the bank accounts. You have no job, no lawyer, no allies. The world doesn't care about little girls with big dreams. It eats them alive." Evelyn's face was pale, her lips pressed together. "He arrives tomorrow," Victoria said quietly. "Be ready. And do try to behave like a lady." With that, she turned and walked out. Morning came draped in silence. Evelyn hadn't slept. Her mind replayed every word Victoria had said like a broken lullaby. "He arrives tomorrow. Be ready. You don't have a choice." She sat curled on the window seat of her bedroom, wearing one of her mother's old silk robes. The sky outside a dim gray veil over the garden hedges. The roses had not been trimmed. Her father's gardener, Harold, used to take pride in pruning them each week, but he hadn't shown up since the funeral. Maybe he was let go. Maybe he, like Evelyn, was no longer welcome. She pressed her forehead to the glass. She hadn't had time to even grieve. The world had shifted too quickly. Victoria had wasted no time seizing control. Evelyn didn't know the man they had arranged for her. Didn't know his name, his face, his story. Only that they'd chosen someone poor, someone from the countryside, as Victoria so dismissively said. Someone they believed wouldn't interfere, wouldn't ask questions, and most importantly, wouldn't protect her. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated her father's daughter. A knock at the door startled her. It was Stacy. She peeked in without waiting. "He's here," she said with a grin that barely masked her delight. "You might want to brush your hair. He looks as poor as dirt." Evelyn stood slowly. "Did you pick him out of a ditch, or just find someone who'd sell his dignity for a few dollars?" "Oh, please," Stacy rolled her eyes. "You're lucky we found anyone willing to take on a spoiled little orphan with no prospects. Just come downstairs and play nice." She disappeared down the hall. Evelyn forced her hands to stop shaking. She walked to the mirror and stared at her reflection. Pale skin, dark circles under her eyes. Her thick black hair fell in soft, unruly waves around her shoulders. Her father used to call her his fierce little raven. Now she was just a girl on the edge of being sold. She changed into a modest navy dress, tied her hair back with a ribbon, and took a steady breath. If this man had any decency, she'd look him in the eyes and tell him no. And if he didn't, she'd find a way to run. Downstairs, the parlor was quiet. Victoria stood near the fireplace, her black morning clothes replaced by a tasteful emerald dress, her expression unreadable. Stacy lounged on the armrest of a settee, inspecting her nails. Then Evelyn saw him. He stood near the front door, hands clasped loosely in front of him, eyes calmly observing the space. He was tall, lean, with skin the color of warm honey and broad shoulders beneath a simple, clean button-up shirt and dark trousers. His shoes were polished, though not new, and his posture was relaxed but confident. He didn't look like a farmhand, and he certainly didn't look afraid. Victoria turned to Evelyn with a tight smile. "This is Jacob." The man stepped forward and gave a small, respectful nod. "Miss Evelyn." His voice was smooth, deep, and steady. No heavy country accent. No trace of nervousness. In fact, there was something deliberate in the way he looked at her, like he was reading her in real time, not judging, but observing. Evelyn blinked. She had expected someone older, unkempt, with rough manners and eager eyes. But Jacob, he was young, maybe mid-20s, and there was a quiet intelligence behind those dark eyes. Victoria broke the silence. Jacob's family owns a small plot of land out near Meadow Ridge. They're honest people. He's willing to take care of Evelyn until she adjusts. And in return, we've offered him a small sum as a wedding gift. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Jacob looked at Victoria, then back to Evelyn. I didn't come for the money. Victoria's smile thinned. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. Then why did you come? Jacob didn't answer right away. His gaze met hers again. Because I don't like the way people treat others like property. Stacy snorted. He thinks he's noble. Victoria ignored her. The paperwork is ready. The marriage license can be signed today, if both parties agree. Evelyn turned sharply. You think I'll sign my life away just like that? Victoria's voice dropped, low and cold. If you refuse, the estate will remain under my control indefinitely. Your inheritance, your access to anything your father left behind. It will all be suspended. You'll have nothing, Evelyn. No home. No money. Not even the clothes in your closet. I'll take the streets over this farce, Evelyn spat. Jacob spoke up again, quiet but firm. Miss Evelyn, may I have a moment with you? Alone. Victoria hesitated. That's not necessary. But Jacob didn't move his gaze. Out of respect, I'd like to speak to her without pressure. Victoria didn't like being challenged. But something in Jacob's calm presence made it difficult for her to say no. She gave a stiff nod and left the room with Stacy, both of them lingering just beyond the doorway. Evelyn folded her arms. What game are you playing? Jacob walked to the window, keeping his voice low. No game. I know this isn't your choice. I don't want to be here under these conditions either. Then why are you here at all? She demanded. He looked back at her. Because someone I trust asked me to. Evelyn frowned. Jacob stepped closer, voice even softer. I know about Victoria. I know how she's treated you. And I know she's hiding things from you, about the estate, about your father's will. She stared at him. I can help you, he said. But I need you to trust me. If we go through with this, it'll be temporary. You'll stay safe. I'll make sure you have space and time. And in the background, I'll help you find what you need to fight back. Evelyn's heart pounded. Why would you help me? She whispered. Jacob gave her the faintest smile. Because your father helped someone close to me once. He saved my family when no one else would. I owe him more than I can repay. Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. She looked away quickly. You don't have to decide now, Jacob said gently. But if you walk out of here alone, they win. And I think you're tired of watching them win. She swallowed hard. Her father's voice echoed again in her mind. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Evie. It's the choice to face it. She turned back to Jacob. You'll give me space? Not try to control me. He nodded. My word. She took a breath, looked toward the door, then back at him. Fine. I'll do it. But deep inside, Evelyn wasn't surrendering. She was preparing. The marriage happened quietly, without music, without flowers, and without joy. Victoria arranged everything within hours, as if she'd been waiting, no planning, for this very moment. The local registrar, a dull-eyed man with yellowing fingernails and a distracted cough, arrived late in the afternoon, carrying a leather folder and a tired expression. He barely looked up from the documents as Evelyn signed her name with trembling fingers. That's it then, he said, tucking the license away. Congratulations. May your union be blessed. There were no guests. No reception. Not even a dress. Evelyn wore the same navy outfit from earlier, her hair still tied back simply, and Jacob stood beside her like a stranger drafted into war. No rings were exchanged. No vows spoken. Just names on paper and a quiet sentence that changed everything. She was a wife, but not by love and not by choice. The moment the registrar left, Victoria clapped her hands and gestured toward the car waiting outside. You'll be leaving now, she said crisply, her voice like cut glass. Your husband's cottage is outside the city, far enough for peace and quiet. Evelyn blinked. You're throwing me out the same day? You're a married woman now, Victoria said, as if explaining something to a child. It would be inappropriate for you to remain in your father's home. Your room is no longer yours. The staff has already packed your bags. Evelyn's lips parted in disbelief. She looked at Stacy, who smirked behind her teacup like a queen savoring her victory. Jacob placed a hand gently on Evelyn's back, not possessively, but protectively. "We'll go," he said. "There's nothing more for us here." Victoria handed Evelyn a sealed envelope. "This is from the estate. A one-time payment to assist you both. Use it wisely." Evelyn took it wordlessly, slipping it into her bag without opening it. Whatever was inside, it wasn't kindness. As they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway. The estate, her childhood home, looked pale and unfamiliar now, like a castle turned to stone. Every window, every brick, held a memory she no longer belonged to. Evelyn didn't turn back. They drove in silence. Jacob's car was old, but clean. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and citrus, and the leather seats were worn but well-maintained. Evelyn sat with her arms crossed, watching the trees roll by through the window, her chest tight with the weight of everything she'd lost. She finally spoke. "So, where are we going?" "My house," Jacob said simply. "Outside Havenbrook. About 45 minutes from the city." "Is it really in the countryside?" Jacob gave a small smile. "It's quiet, yes, but not as far off as Victoria probably wanted. She probably hoped I'd be eaten by wolves." He chuckled under his breath. "Wouldn't put it past her." Evelyn turned to look at him. "Who are you really? You said my father helped someone close to you. Who was it?" Jacob kept his eyes on the road. "My mother." That surprised her. "She worked at one of your father's foundations. Years ago, before it grew into what it is now. She was a single mother, struggling to support me and my brother. Most people look the other way. But your father, he didn't." He paused, shifting gears as they curved around a hillside road. "He gave her a job. A real one. Not just charity. He made sure we had health care. Helped her get a loan to buy a home. That house is the one we're going to now. She's gone now, but we never forgot him." Evelyn's voice softened. "I didn't know. He never made a big show of it. That was his way." Silence returned, but this time it felt warmer, less hostile. When they finally pulled into the long gravel path leading to Jacob's home, Evelyn sat up straighter. It wasn't what she expected. The house wasn't some tiny, broken cottage like Victoria had described. It was a 2-story farmhouse, modest but beautiful, with pale gray siding, a wraparound porch, and large windows that looked out over rolling fields. Birds chirped in the trees. A white fence surrounded the property. There was a garden out back, and a red barn stood farther down the slope. It was quiet, but not lonely. Jacob opened the car door for her. "Welcome home." Evelyn stepped out slowly. She stared at the house. "This is yours." He nodded. She followed him up the porch steps, her suitcase thudding on each plank. Inside, the house was warm and sunlit, the walls painted soft shades of cream and blue. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, where thick wool rugs covered hardwood floors. A cat with gray fur and bright yellow eyes peeked from behind a couch and darted away. "This isn't a poor man's house," Evelyn murmured. Jacob turned to her. "No, it's not." She looked at him. "You let Victoria believe you were poor." "I didn't correct her," he said calmly. "She wanted someone beneath her. Someone she could bribe to take you away. I just gave her what she wanted." "But why?" "Because I needed to get you out of that house. Away from them. And close enough that we could start figuring out what they've done." Evelyn's breath caught. "Jacob," her voice trembled. He stepped forward. "We don't have to pretend. Not in here. This is your space now, too. I meant what I said. You're not trapped. We'll find the truth together." Evelyn's eyes burned with sudden tears. She turned away quickly and whispered, "I don't even know how to live like this. I've never done anything on my own. Never had a job. I barely know who I am without my father." Jacob's voice was steady. "Then let's find out who you are." She turned back to him, her tears streaking her cheeks. "And if I fall apart?" He smiled. "Then I'll be here to remind you how to stand." That night, Evelyn sat curled up on the couch, a blanket over her legs, while Jacob cooked dinner in the small open kitchen. He was surprisingly good at it. The scent of garlic and roasted vegetables filled the air, mingling with the soft notes of an old jazz record playing from a dusty speaker. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt safe. Not happy, not healed, but safe. She watched him move with quiet confidence, not a trace of arrogance in his movements. He set down a plate in front of her, then joined her with his own. "This is temporary," she said softly as they began to eat. "I know. I'm going to get my life back." Jacob raised his glass. To your life. She raised hers too. And to justice. They clinked gently. And outside, the stars above the countryside twinkled like silent witnesses, watching the first steps of a quiet rebellion that neither Victoria nor Stacy could ever have foreseen. The next morning brought a strange kind of calm. Evelyn woke up wrapped in unfamiliar sheets, the air scented with lavender and clean linen. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until she opened her eyes and saw the slanted sunlight casting lines across a soft blue ceiling. She wasn't in her father's house. She was in Jacob's. Married, exiled, disinherited, but not defeated. Downstairs, the sound of clinking dishes and the low hum of a radio reminded her that she wasn't alone. She got up, washed her face in the ensuite bathroom, and changed into a simple cotton dress from the bag Victoria's staff had packed. Most of the clothes were drab, barely fitting her, likely chosen out of spite. Still, she managed to find something decent and pulled her hair into a loose bun. When she entered the kitchen, Jacob was setting a teapot on the table. He smiled without a word and handed her a mug. The steam warmed her fingers. You didn't have to cook, she murmured. I like to, he replied. It gives me time to think. They sat across from each other in the soft morning light, the scent of scrambled eggs and toast lingering in the air. I've been thinking too, Evelyn said, cradling her mug. About the will. Jacob looked up. My father, she continued, was meticulous. He updated his will every year. His lawyer, Mr. Halvorson, had copies of everything. But after the funeral, Victoria claimed he died without one. That doesn't make sense. Jacob nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. She said the estate would stay in her name until things settled. But my father was too careful for that. He wouldn't have left her that kind of control. He never trusted her that deeply. Jacob leaned forward. So, what are you thinking? I want to find Mr. Halvorson. If there was a legitimate will, he'd know. Jacob nodded. Then we'll find him. But first, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a sleek black binder. You should see this. He placed it gently on the table between them and opened it to reveal a series of typed notes, maps, and printed emails. Evelyn blinked. What is all this? I started digging weeks ago, Jacob said. The moment I heard your father passed, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't act sooner because I needed a way in. Then Victoria started looking for a husband for you. It gave me my opening. He flipped to a page marked with a yellow tab. This, he pointed to a printed email, is a message sent from Victoria's private email to a property attorney. She inquired about transferring deed rights of your father's estate 2 days before his funeral. Evelyn's heart sank. She didn't waste a second. She was already assuming ownership, Jacob said. Even though legally, the house and company assets should have been frozen until probate completed. But if she could convince everyone there was no will, she could walk away with everything, Evelyn whispered. Jacob flipped to another page. I also found this. Stacy recently took out a $70,000 loan under the estate's value as collateral. She used it to buy a luxury car, one your father never approved. Evelyn looked up sharply. That means they've already started using his wealth. Yes, Jacob said quietly. And if we don't stop them now, there won't be anything left to reclaim. Evelyn sat back in her chair, stunned. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the speed, the cold calculation. Her father's body hadn't even been in the ground for a full week, and already they were bleeding the life out of his legacy. Jacob closed the binder. We need 2 things. 1, to locate Mr. Halvorson and get a copy of the will. 2, to keep Victoria unaware that we're looking. If she senses we're onto her, she'll bury everything. Evelyn nodded, her eyes sharp. Then we move in silence. That afternoon, they drove into the city together, under the guise of running errands. Evelyn wore sunglasses and a scarf, not because anyone was likely to recognize her, but because she didn't want to be seen as the broken girl her stepmother had tried to create. They stopped at a quiet office plaza on the edge of town. Jacob had already done the research. Halvorson's law firm still had a sign on the door. Halvorson & Fields, Estate and Trust Attorneys. Jacob waited outside while Evelyn went in alone. The receptionist, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s with tired eyes, barely looked up when Evelyn stepped in. I'm here to see Mr. Halvorson, Evelyn said. It's urgent. I'm Evelyn Beaumont, Jonathan Beaumont's daughter. The woman blinked. Oh, my dear. Her tone shifted immediately. I'm so sorry for your loss. Evelyn offered a faint smile. Thank you. I need to ask about his will. The receptionist nodded. Give me a moment. Minutes later, Evelyn was ushered into a quiet, wood-paneled office where Mr. Halverson, an older man with a thin mustache and sharp glasses, sat behind a polished oak desk. He rose to greet her. Miss Beaumont, he said, shaking her hand firmly. I've been expecting you. Evelyn frowned. You have? I thought you'd come much sooner, he said gently, but I suppose Victoria kept you busy. Evelyn sat down, her hands cold. Mr. Halverson, my father's will. Did he leave one? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to a locked cabinet. He opened it slowly, pulled out a leather-bound folder, and returned to his desk. He updated it 6 months before his death, the lawyer said, and you, Miss Beaumont, were listed as his sole heir. Evelyn's heart stopped. All shares of the estate, the company, the house, his personal savings, everything was left to you, with instructions for Victoria and Stacy to be provided modest living allowances. She stared at him. But they said there was no will. Halverson's jaw clenched. I sent them a copy the day after the funeral. I received a response from Victoria's lawyer, claiming the document was fabricated, but it's filed with the court. She can't legally claim ownership unless the will is discredited. So what happens now? I'll file for an immediate injunction to freeze the estate's financial access, he said, but it might take days, even weeks. In the meantime, you must be careful. Victoria won't go down easily. Evelyn stood slowly, her legs barely holding her. Thank you. Thank you for keeping this safe. Halverson nodded. Your father was a good man. He'd be proud you came. When Evelyn returned to the car, her face was pale. Jacob took one look at her and didn't speak until she was seated beside him. Well? He asked gently. She looked at him, her eyes glinting. I own everything. Jacob gave a slow, quiet nod. Then we're not fighting to win anymore. Evelyn's voice turned firm. We're fighting to take back what's already mine. The air in the estate's marble hallways had changed. Victoria paced through her late husband's office with a tight jaw and eyes flickering with unease. She had sensed it. A disturbance. The calm confidence she wore like a coat began to crack the moment she received the letter from Mr. Halverson's office, a formal notice of injunction. The will had surfaced, and Evelyn was not gone and forgotten as she had hoped. How could this happen? Victoria seethed, throwing the letter across the desk. Stacy lounged in a velvet chair nearby, swirling a glass of expensive juice. She's just bluffing, she said lazily. There's no way she has the nerve to challenge us. She's nothing without Dad. And her husband? He looks like he can barely afford a haircut. Victoria didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the window, watching as the estate's landscapers trimmed the garden hedges. All this was supposed to be hers now. The empire Jonathan built, the family name, the respect. She had worn the face of the grieving widow so well, smiled at the board members, soothed the staff with false promises. And now, her plans were unraveling. She's smarter than I thought, Victoria murmured. And that husband of hers, something is off. Meanwhile, back in Havenbrook, Evelyn sat at Jacob's desk with her laptop open and Mr. Halverson on a video call. His voice crackled softly through the speaker. I've submitted the injunction request, he said. It will prevent any further withdrawal of estate assets until the court rules on the will. But we need to be strategic. Victoria has connections, old friends in banking, a few on the city council. Evelyn nodded. Then we'll fight her the way she's never prepared for, with truth. Halverson gave a short, proud smile. Spoken like your father. When the call ended, Jacob entered with a tray of tea and a plate of lemon shortbread. I called in a favor, he said, setting the tray down. An old friend of mine, Marcus. He's a forensic accountant. Used to work with my brother's firm. He's willing to go through your father's company ledgers, quietly. If Victoria's been moving money around, he'll find it. Evelyn looked up. Why are you doing all this for me? Jacob paused. Because it's right, and because your father once did the same for my mother, when no one else would. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment. You talk about your mother a lot. She was everything to me, Jacob said quietly. When she died, I thought I'd never see decency in the world again. Then your father stepped in, and now I see a piece of her in you. The room fell silent, but the air between them had shifted, gently, warmly. 2 days later, Evelyn and Jacob visited the headquarters of Beaumont Holdings, her father's legacy. The grand building in the city's financial district towered over them like a monument, its glass facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. It had been nearly a month since Evelyn had last walked through its doors. The staff had been told she was taking time away after the funeral. But her sudden reappearance sent a ripple through the corridors. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Is that Evelyn? She's back? I thought Victoria was running things now." Evelyn held her head high. They met with Linda, her father's longtime executive assistant, a firm, silver-haired woman in her 60s who had remained loyal for over 2 decades. She stood when Evelyn entered the office and opened her arms. "Miss Evelyn," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "we've missed you." Evelyn embraced her, the first warmth she'd felt in days. "I need your help," she whispered. "I'm not going to let my father's memory be erased." Linda nodded. "Then let's get to work." That afternoon, in a quiet conference room behind the executive suite, Linda handed Evelyn a USB stick. "This contains the board's last correspondence with your stepmother," she said. "Minutes, proposals, internal memos. You'll want to see how she's tried to reshape the company since he passed." Jacob loaded the files into Evelyn's laptop, scrolling through emails with growing intensity. "She's been preparing to sell off your father's charitable division," he said after a moment. "The foundation he started for single mothers, for displaced families, that's being folded into a luxury branding arm." Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "No, not while I'm still breathing." Linda cleared her throat. "There's something else. One of the board members, Mr. Langley, he voted against Victoria's changes. He's suspicious of the legitimacy of her leadership. If you reach out to him, he might join your side." Evelyn looked up, then set up a meeting. That evening, Evelyn and Jacob sat on the farmhouse porch, the sky awash with orange and gold. The trees rustled in the breeze. She held a copy of the board memo in her lap, the wind gently tugging its corners. "She's not just greedy," Evelyn said quietly. "She's trying to rewrite my father's legacy, destroy everything he stood for." Jacob sat beside her, watching the horizon. "Then let's make sure she fails." There was a long pause, and then Evelyn turned to him. "I feel like I've changed." "You have," Jacob replied. "You've become the woman your father believed in." Evelyn looked down. "I never thought I'd fight like this. I never knew I had it in me." Jacob smiled gently. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to find who you really are." And as the sky darkened and the stars blinked awake, Evelyn knew that the battle was far from over, but for the first time, she believed in herself enough to win it. Victoria couldn't sleep. It was nearing midnight, and her silk robe rustled softly as she moved through the dimly lit hallways of the estate she had once fought tooth and nail to enter. The grand mirrors reflected her face in pieces, fragments she barely recognized. Her lips were dry, her eyes weary. Her world, once under her careful control, was slowly unraveling. The will, the court notice, the sudden freeze on all accounts, and Evelyn, always Evelyn. She gritted her teeth as she passed the study, still filled with Jonathan's books, his smell, his legacy. She had tried to replace him, tried to turn the company into something shinier, more modern, more reflective of her vision. But the world had loved Jonathan Beaumont, and now his daughter had come back from the dead, metaphorically speaking, stronger than ever. In the guest wing, Stacy lay sprawled across her bed, her phone buzzing with unread messages. The car she had bought with estate funds, a sleek cherry-red coupe, had been repossessed earlier that day. The bank had frozen the accounts. The staff had started whispering. One of the housekeepers had even quit, telling Stacy flatly, Miss Evelyn was the real lady of this house. Stacy threw her phone across the room. "This is ridiculous. We're still in control." "No," Victoria said from the doorway. "We're not." At the same time, across the city, Evelyn stepped out of a black sedan in front of Beaumont Holdings headquarters. She was no longer wearing the subdued clothing her stepmother had packed for her. Tonight, she wore a fitted dark blazer, modest heels, and a quiet determination. Jacob walked beside her. Tonight wasn't just a business meeting. It wasn't a legal check-in. Tonight was the board's emergency session, a chance for Evelyn to present her case, show them the true leadership Jonathan had always envisioned. Inside the conference room, the board of directors sat in a quiet, tense semicircle. At the center was Mr. Langley, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s who had served on the board since the company's inception. He nodded curtly when Evelyn entered. "I've called this meeting to discuss the estate dispute surrounding Jonathan Beaumont's assets and the company's current leadership," he began. "Miss Beaumont, you have the floor." Evelyn stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "My father built this company with integrity, generosity, and a commitment to those who had less. He started with nothing. He taught me that the purpose of wealth was not comfort, it was responsibility." She paused, looking each board member in the eye. "My stepmother has violated everything he stood for. She tried to hide his will. She started selling off charitable assets. She and her daughter treated his death as a business opportunity. But I have come not just with emotion, I've come with proof." Jacob handed out the documents, ledgers, emails, statements from staff, a sworn affidavit from Mr. Halverson. Evelyn continued, "I am not here to ask for sympathy. I am here to reclaim what is rightfully mine and to restore my father's legacy." Silence hung thick in the air. Finally, Mr. Langley cleared his throat. "The board recognizes Miss Evelyn Beaumont as the legal heir and interim CEO, pending court confirmation of the will, effective immediately." There was a beat of stunned quiet. Then, quietly, applause. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she shook Mr. Langley's hand, but her eyes were clear. The news spread like wildfire. Beaumont heiress reinstated amid scandalous cover-up by stepmother. Charity arm of Beaumont Holdings saved from corporate overhaul. Victoria Beaumont under legal investigation for estate fraud. The public, long enamored with Jonathan's legacy, rallied behind Evelyn. Old employees reached out. Business partners sent letters of support. Donors began to return. But the biggest moment came a week later, during a press conference held on the steps of the family estate. Evelyn stood at a podium in front of the gates, with reporters gathered below. "This house," she began, "was my childhood home, and for a while it was poisoned by deceit. But today, I'm here to tell the truth and close a chapter that should have ended with peace, not betrayal." Victoria and Stacy were not in attendance. They had received formal eviction notices that morning, delivered by the sheriff. "I want to thank those who stood by my father. And I want to say this to anyone who's ever been pushed aside by people who were supposed to protect them. You are stronger than they think." Applause rose from the crowd. Evelyn looked out at the faces, some familiar, many strangers, and then back at Jacob, who stood behind her with quiet pride. Later that evening, Evelyn stood alone in her father's study. She opened one of the drawers and pulled out an old photograph. Her father, arms around her, both of them laughing in a park long ago. She traced the edges with her fingertips. "You were right, Daddy," she whispered. "They tried to take it all, but I remembered what you taught me." Jacob entered the room quietly. "They're gone," he said. Victoria and Stacy left without saying a word. No fight, no final act. Evelyn nodded. "They don't need to say anything. The silence is loud enough." He moved closer. "The company is yours now. The house, everything." "I don't want all of it," she replied softly. "Just the parts that mattered to him." Jacob touched her hand. "And what about the parts that matter to you?" Evelyn looked up at him. "Like you?" His expression softened. "You tell me." She leaned forward, gently resting her head against his chest. "I think you saved me, not just from them, but from myself." He held her quietly, as the weight of months lifted off her shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn restructured the foundation in her father's name. She kept the company running with new leadership, focused on ethics and community outreach. She even offered small settlements to some of the employees and vendors her stepmother had wronged. Victoria was eventually charged with fraud and obstruction of estate law. She pled no contest, and her sentence included community service and public restitution. Stacy disappeared from the spotlight, her social media accounts deleted, her flashy lifestyle a ghost of the past. As for Evelyn and Jacob, they married again, this time not in secret or under pressure, but in a quiet garden ceremony with people who loved them. Their journey had started in shadows, but it ended in sunlight. Epilogue. Years later, Evelyn would walk the halls of her family home, holding the hand of her daughter, a child with Jacob's thoughtful eyes and her father's quiet strength. She would pass the study and smile, knowing that the man who once taught her how to be strong still lived in every choice she made. And when people asked her how she survived it all, how she came back from betrayal, how she reclaimed her legacy, she would answer simply, "I remembered who I was." And in doing so, she became more than just a daughter or an heiress. She became a woman who rewrote her own story and never gave her crown away again.